This is Eric L. Dunavant, the Mindset Disruption Strategist. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Redefining Success. And I know you're going to enjoy our interview today. Joining me today is Patrick Kilner. He's an author, he's a husband, he's a father, he's a 17-year real estate veteran. But what we're going to be talking about today is more the author, husband, and father side of this, and his book and movement of Find Your Six. So Patrick, thank you so much for being with me today.
Eric, it is an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know how I start my show, same way every time. It's a Saturday afternoon. I've got the grill fired up. We're all hanging out. I've invited all my friends over. Would you please introduce yourself to my friends, but you can't talk about your work?
Sure. As you said, I'm a husband and father. So usually if I'm at the grill side, I've got a 2-year-old attached to my leg, spilling something on me. Our youngest is 2, our oldest is 17. Awesome. And we've been blessed with 8 total, which is just a tremendous thing. So I usually say my wife is super competitive and runs circles around me. She is the CEO of this home and culture that we have here. So that really is, frankly, I see business as merely a vehicle for fatherhood. And the degree to which my business serves my family is the degree to which it's successful. Money follows that. And I think for me, I've done so much to arrange my work life so that I can be a present father. And it was great. I was talking to my kids last night around we put the little ones to bed, and we've got sort of 2 generations. The older ones who want to stay up late and talk, and their brains like really turn on around 9 o'clock when I'm getting tired.
Exactly.
And so, fire pit outside. It's beautiful here in the DC area right now as we transition into fall. And so we're just enjoying each other, and the music is on, and one of the kids is playing guitar. And we're just, to me, that's where it's at. That's where I'm so thankful. And we talk a lot about the business and the family together. And my little girl, my now my third, and she was asking me, Dad, when can I come and spend some time in your business? She's only 14. Wow. But she saw her older brother this summer helping me, shadowing me. I gave him some discrete projects over the summer and paid him some money because he was worth it to the business. And I see the vehicle of business as a tremendous vehicle for the formation of your kids.
I love that. There's so many questions I want to ask, but I kind of want to start with this. Patrick, what are you passionate about?
It might sound trite, but really you only get one shot at this. Yep. And I've been entrusted with these children, and they're not really mine; they're God's. Yep. So I just get to hang out with them for a short period of time. And it's coming as I have a 17-year-old. You've got a kid away at school. Like you only have so long, yes. And so, gosh, So what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about clocking hours with these kids and with their mother, because time is short. And so I don't know if I'm more passionate about anything else than that, because I feel just a tremendous obligation, and completely, I've never been the smartest guy, but I'll put in the hours. Yeah. And I think that has to happen relationally first.
So what I've typically found to be true, and you can tell me, if we need to go a different direction, is for a lot of guys who finally figure this out, meaning that the time I spend at home actually returns an investment on what I'm spending at the office. Like I get a return on investment from the time I spend at home. Most times, like, they hit a really dark spot that forced them to face it. It's not something they just kind of figured out along the way. What about for you? Did you have that same journey?
For sure. And that is, you're absolutely right. I think it's a very common theme. And, I think when we think oftentimes of dark spots, we think of it as self-imposed, or at least
Mm,
I do. Like, hey, I did these things, and therefore and the reality is dark spots come as a result of just life. And we're going to run into, in my book, I talk about disruptive factors, when it comes to
yeah.
business, but we all have disruption on personal levels and professional levels alike. And it's just part of the human struggle.
Yeah.
So, so yes, for me and my wife Elena, our fifth child, JP, was born with special needs, and he was born with not just special needs, but terminal special needs. So he
Mm,
was only with us for 14 months, and our other four children at that time were perfectly healthy. He was born with a condition called spinal muscular atrophy, which right now there's actually treatments that allow kids who were as severe as him, and he was the most severe case we could find in the United States.
really?
So it was really, really tough. And we were running a NICU out of our home
Mm,
for a year, to bring him home, to have him be with his siblings, and to live a new normal. And it was just the most amazing year of our lives. We had no idea how long we'd have him, because this this disease takes people at very different times of life. So, there was kids diagnosed as early as he was who had already gone through college.
okay.
Um, but we, both sadly and joyfully had him for the months that we had him.
Mm,
And so what was really interesting about that is that, so on a business level, it reframed the time that I spent with my family radically,
mm,
because all of a sudden I physically couldn't be present to my business in a way that I was prior,
yeah.
which meant that I had to shift and become someone who really understood talent
Mm,
and understood getting out of the way of talent and training people and investing into them very quickly and very deeply,
yeah.
so that the business could survive, because this is how I provide for my family. And it became one of the absolute greatest blessings to
Mm,
my business. And there's so many other lessons in terms of family life and great things there. But I, having JP during those months totally reframed everything. And so I ended up hiring people in order to take over roles that I were on my plate. My job description
mhm.
became theirs. And my job, I basically had to fire myself from those job descriptions and become a better leader as a result. It also made me realize that the people who matter the most during a disruptive period are not uh, commodities. You can't. Those relationships that become, they allow you to get through difficulties on a personal level, on a
Yeah.
professional level, I was so blessed to have them as well. And that's really what caused me, fast forward 8 years from his passing,
Mhm.
I began writing my book. And because of this realities, I studied economics in grad school, and disruptive theory and this sort of thing, and was just fascinated by the reality that people find disruption in every single industry, and the people who use it as a catapult have tremendous success and an amazing impact on the
Mm,
world and their industry. And a lot of other people get hit by disruption and get totally knocked off course. I remember a doctor saying to us in the hospital, Pat and Elena, 86% of people who lose a child, their marriage also ends.
mm, mm.
And I remember talking to Elena about it, and I said, we're not going to be a statistic here.
Yeah.
So what we decide to do with adversity and disruption, if you will, radically, it actually is ultimately the source of joy, I
Mm,
think, for us,
yeah.
and ultimately allows us teaching moments for our children and for our organizations that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Do you have you, I mean, I can't imagine, I'm sure there's so many lessons. Have you narrowed down like what the biggest lesson you had to learn or the biggest thing you had to change during that time? Was it the people as commodities change? Was that really kind of the biggest shift, or what really came up for you?
Yeah, there's so much, but there's a saying that we have now internally in the business, and I try to teach anybody who new comes on this early on, is that is sort of an efficiency question, but it's an efficiency question so that you can go focus on the right things. And it goes something like this: go and spend your professional time, effort, and money with the most influential, so that you can go and spend your personal time, effort, and money with the most in need. Or in my case, they're my kids, right?
Yeah.
They happen to have my same last name. And so I think so often, and prior to John Paul, we believed, or I believed, that there were never enough hours in the day, that I simply could work constantly, and that was the only way I was going to get ahead. And after having him in our lives, what I realized is that no, it's all about the time spent with those who I have this incredible moral obligation to. And in order to do that, my business needs to serve that, which means I have to be very, very selective about the talent that I hang out with, both internal to the business as well as external to the business. The people who are my raving fans, the people who are my best accounts, the people who are my mentors, all of that. And so being super strategic about that is what I suppose I'm most passionate about, to get into sort of a more granular version of what I said earlier.
Here's something I want to kind of ask you about, because you have this so well dialed in. I would love for you to maybe comment for some of our listeners. I think sometimes as business owners, we get so focused on, like, I need to make an influence, I need to make a difference. And we start looking everywhere out, but inside our own home. Like, we almost feel, I think sometimes business owners feel guilty, like, I'm not doing enough for the community, I'm not doing enough for XYZ. Talk a little bit about the lessons that you've learned about the gift of turning that influence focus inside to your home.
Yeah. I think it's a question of generosity.
Okay. I love that.
I think ultimately, the people who I know who have, you can't be too generous with your family. It's impossible. It's an impossibility. And it is generous because you may not receive anything, almost definitely won't receive anything in the short term. In terms of a pat on the back or anything like that. It's you're doing your job. Like, this is the work of being a parent. So I think I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it really is a function of, one of my mentors says to me quite often, Pat, God is not outdone in generosity. So, like, basically, you think you're doubling down on this stuff, like, you're not even close.
Right.
And yeah, you're being very generous. And I think that to me is really it. What are people going to say about you at your funeral? Like, they're not going to care that you spent the extra hour at work. They are going to care that your kids are going to care. And that's the legacy you pass on. And so I think it really does come down to a question of being really abandoned to the mission, right? This is what we know of great leaders, is they abandon themselves to the mission at hand, regardless of how they feel at the time.
That's good. That's good. Talk a little bit more about your book, kind of what led you to write the book itself, and what is the movement of Find Your Six?
Yeah, I think there's they say a book finds you. There's some of that. Look, I got to a point where I was turning 40 and looking back on a great career. something I'm really proud of, and having trained a lot of people, because when we had our son, I had to shift into much more of a training and mentoring sort of capacity for my company. And when I did that, I started codifying some ideas. I also started interviewing people about how they had become successful in different places. And I've always just been fascinated by what makes great people have the impact that they do, both in running great businesses, just by the numbers, as well as having very cohesive family lives as well. So I sat down with about 60 of the most successful people that I could find, and there's a lot of them here in the DC metro area, of all sorts of stripes, not just politicians, right? And so what I was curious about was, who were the people that had made them capable of going through their own disruptive periods, right? Because if you've been in business long enough, you're going to hit disruption. And so I sat down with them and interviewed them. What I found was that so many, really, the average number of people that had a massive impact on these highly successful people over the course of their entire careers was just 6 people.
Really?
And that was really cool. Like, wow, this is not a question of like wide scope. This is a question of drilling down into a handful of really, really great relationships. And I had found that was the case as well. I was so fortunate early in my career to have found a handful of really impactful people who, when on the personal disruption side of things, as well as on the professional disruption side of things. I mean, I was able to grow through 2008, 2009, when the rest of the real estate market was just going haywire. And gosh, I mean, we went from 1.5 million people with their real estate licenses to 750,000. Like, they cut in half in 18 months. So, and it was all because I had the right people in my corner. And I knew that was the case. I thought, well, maybe that's just me. But what I found is that that's definitely the case for these others as well. And so in interviewing these folks, what I was trying to figure out was, okay, if that's the case, if it's a handful plus one of great people, how do we find those people faster? Like, what's the methodology? I'm a business person. I want to know, is it repeatable? Is there a system? Is it repeatable? Is it teachable to others? Because that allows me leverage. That allows me to, you want impact, bring people into your organization where they can do the same.
Yeah.
And so how do I do that? And that's what the book really is about, is not just that you should find these 6 people, but also a way of looking at talent that allows you the correct vision for doing that. And then the path forward, the methodology that I learned from these great individuals who are so generous with me to sit down with me for multiple hours each one and tell me about their stories as well. And so that's what the book is. It's really how to break away from that, and really the pressures that keep us from doing this as well. So that's what the book is about. And it was a great passion project, if you will. Frankly, there's a lot of people who talk about writing books, and I thought, I don't want to be the person who talks about it. And I also want to become a better writer and communicator.
Yeah.
And I think one of the only ways to do that is to immerse yourself and just do it. And so I hired an amazing editor who kicked my rear end on a daily basis for 2 years and helped me do this.
Yeah. Writing a book, for those that have not done it before, is not a quick endeavor.
Oh, no. Definitely. There's nothing
only
quick
100
about
pages. How long could that take you? I mean, come on.
Right. No, it is brutal. Especially, look, we all fancy ourselves writers. I've quickly learned that I had not honed that skill in quite some time, and certainly not to this level.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you coming on finding your 6?
Really well. So what's interesting about this is that I was fortunate enough to find 6 early for me.
Okay.
And what's been interesting is, just like a great bench of talent, when you're running a team, your six aren't always the same people. So once you find your initial six, it really grows. And I kind of think about it in two ways. One, I've got my six who are my mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really tough about that, as you get a few gray hairs or lose some of them, is that finding mentors can be a little bit tougher, I find. For me in my 40s now, finding those peer relationships that are mentor relationships are harder. People are busier. You feel a little bit weird about going and asking for advice all the time. Whereas in my 20s, I could easily find those mentors. So I've had a lot of people say to me, gosh, I wish I had this book in my 20s. I would have found my mentors faster as well. So that's one segment of six. The other segment for me in business is, who are the people, those business owners who I can collaborate with and help them grow their businesses, who are in adjacent industries oftentimes, and who we can build something bigger and better together. And so those are constantly, I'm constantly looking for that talent as well. And so that's, and frankly, again, it's changing this year. I'm bringing one of those people in to meet the rest of my team tomorrow. And he's bringing his team in, and we're just collaborating and masterminding on how we can do more business together. And those become very, very powerful. But people retire, life circumstances. So you always need to have that bench of talent in that way as well. And I'd say the third way that I think is worth mentioning is internal talent. Who am I looking for internally? And I am very fortunate to have a really, really awesome, strong six. And I'm always surprised at how abundant talent is. I think if you're not in the talent game, it's easy to make bad hires, right? If you will. But what I have found is that we're constantly getting referred because of the network we've built to find those external six people to our business who really help us grow. They also are looking for internal talent for us as well. So we're constantly getting referrals. We have at least a conversation a week with somebody who's just curious and who we're referred to. And so, we don't need to post online to find new and great people. And so that's, there's this really cool interplay. Again, how bulletproof are you going to be for your next disruption? It really is. It's all about the right people around you who want to go to the same place.
What are you finding? You mentioned this a little bit, but what do you think keeps most business owners from actually going after this find your six? And I'm going to guess the number one is that we kind of hold on to this idea that nobody else understands what I'm going through and I just have to do this alone.
Yeah, I think there is that, like, the ego of, and I certainly had this as well until I was forced right the heck out of it. I just couldn't, I literally couldn't be there for my clients in the same way. But this belief, yes, that nobody can do it like me. Nobody's as invested in me. And the reality is, when you get into the game of talent, you realize that, frankly, God's made some amazing people who are exponentially better than you at a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so get used to that idea. Now, you may feel as though nobody can be as passionate about this, and that may be right, but it doesn't mean that they can't execute on discrete and important things that you may not be as gifted at.
Yeah.
If given the right motivation, if given the right incentive package, frankly, if given the right vision for where they can go in their career.
Sure.
And so I think that's the first thing. I think oftentimes we're not great at casting a vision for others because we can't imagine that they would want our vision. And we assume that they have a vision that is of a similar scale. So we start a business and we go, well, I mean, I've never worked for somebody else. I mean, since grad school.
Right.
And that was just a year. And so for me, it's impossible for me to think that I would want to adopt somebody else's vision. But the reality is most people are looking for a vision to be part of.
Yeah.
And so what motivates us as small business owners to go out there and start our own thing and take risk and charge ahead regardless of what the odds on paper say. What motivates us is unique and kind of odd in the marketplace. And what most people really, my business partner would not have come into the industry without my encouragement. And he is as important to the business as I am, but we have different roles. And I've got much more of a visionary role and he's much more of an implementer role.
Yep.
And so, and the combination of that has allowed us growth that we couldn't have imagined otherwise or done without each other. So it's that I think is important. But I think the other thing that really holds us back is this idea that, and I talk about this in the book, so many businesses are steeped in this idea that it's all about the numbers. It's all about just quantity of leads. Yep. It's all about just, and that's, in the book, I talk about this as the lead gen mindset. And it's really a mindset question. Like, yes, on my chart of accounts, I have lead generation, that I know how much I'm spending in that category. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a mindset towards people that sees them as commodities. That goes for the people internally, like, hey, we just need more people pounding the phones and dialing for dollars or whatever it is, right? The more salespeople out there, the better. And that is a commodity mindset towards those people. And how many people do you know who have gone to, great sales organizations and then they churn out? Well, they got the best training around, but I'm not there 2 years from now. Versus an organization that sees each person that comes in as an obligation. And like you don't get to fire your kids, right? So how do you see them? And what is your obligation to them in terms of the development of that talent?
Yeah.
If you had that same mindset towards the people in your organization, they would cut off their left arm for the organization. They would do anything because you have a vision for them that is oftentimes greater than they have for themselves.
That's good.
So I think that is when we start to commoditize human relationships, and that's just one example of that, we begin to bring in people who are it's a carrot stick reality.
Yep.
What does that do to the client experience? That commoditizes the client experience. When we commoditize the client experience, all that needs to happen for our business to become disruptable is for somebody to come in and offer what appears to be the same thing that we are at a lower price or in a quicker app. And so don't want to be disruption proof. It's about the people you surround yourself with. It's about where you source talent. It's the people that you bring into your organization. And it's about the commoditization or lack thereof of the client experience as well.
That's good. That's good. Pat, is there anything we didn't get a chance to talk about today that you want to make sure you got some time to share?
I feel like we could go on for
We
days,
probably could.
No, I think we hit on so much, and I want to encourage people. So often people talk about their business, and really what they're talking about is their practice. And I think this is an important distinction for people, right? Because you're going to file taxes as a business owner and this sort of thing. Is your business capable of being around even if you got hit by a bus tomorrow? That's a business. And that requires a mindset towards the people that you're cultivating around you.
Yep.
So that they can take care of their families regardless of whether you're there or not. And so I think the biggest encouragement needs to be kind of what you oftentimes ask about, where's the world going to be after you? You want to have a real impact. Well, build organizations, actually codify ideas and organizations such that other people can do for their families what you're aspiring to do for yours.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. That is so good. Hey, Pat, if people want to get in touch with you or follow what you're doing, get a copy of your book, what's the best way to do all of those things?
Super easy. Find Your Six, all spelled out.
Okay.
SIX.com. That's where you can find out more about me, download a free chapter of the book. I have a challenge on that site. It's an 8-week download. You can download it and challenge yourself to go find your six or begin that process. So So all of those resources are there for free on my website, findyoursix.com. And you can also reach out to me and we can touch base on anything you want to talk about.
Fantastic. Fantastic. You need to go visit the website, and this challenge sounds fantastic, especially if you're not someone who has your six, or you've got a little bit of that ego in the way, thinking that you don't need it. Can tell you, it just makes all the difference in the world. Pat, we've come to the end of the show. My final question is always the same. In 3 generations, what do you hope your great grandchildren remember about you?
I hope that they know that to be part of our family is to be someone who is radically generous with the gifts that they've been given. And that hopefully they'll see that in me.
I love that. I love that our interview began and ends with generosity. How special is that?
Amen.
Pat, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Eric.
Everyone, we will be with you again for another episode of Redefining Success. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you. Have a fantastic day.